Just one day after refusing to take responsibility for the near assassination of former President Donald Trump, Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle resigned before lawmakers had a chance to impeach her. Whistleblowers revealed to Senator Josh Hawley that the individual assigned to guard a rooftop abandoned his post due to hot weather on the day that Donald Trump was shot. And with Biden stepping aside, can conservatives be confident in Trump's ability to beat Kamala, or is some cautious optimism in order? Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Tuesday, July 23rd. Earlier today, Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle resigned just one day after a disastrous hearing before the House Oversight Committee after demands from both sides of the political aisle that she step down. Matthew Peterson is editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Steve Baker is an investigative journalist for Blaze News. So, Steve, this is a different tone, right? Yesterday, Cheatle said that she would not resign. So what led to this sudden change?
Absolutely no idea. I mean, we really don't know. I mean, that's not the answer you wanted to hear from me. I'm supposed to know these things. I'm supposed to be maybe the expert that has investigated this and found out. But the reality is that she did. She did a 180 from yesterday, very defiant, telling those Congress members that she was not going to resign and that she was, in fact, the best person for the job. She got a phone call last night or early this morning from somebody, probably somebody at the very top of the food chain at DHS, and it said it's time for you to move on. And that's the most likely scenario. Is that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, we should be honest. I mean, I was on here yesterday saying, look, she doesn't have to resign, and I think that's right. The irksome thing about it was the attitude was, I don't have to. We're the administrative state, and you don't really rule us, Congress. So none of us are convinced that Congress actually is the reason, the hearing is the reason for her resigning. But certainly there was enough pressure somewhere for her to resign. We should be honest that, she did resign, which is a good thing. That's what she should have done. On the other hand, the immediate thought is this part of the cover-up? which is a little ridiculous, right? But also is a serious question. Will they actually then investigate what happened? Or will they say, well, we got rid of her, and everything's okay?
Well, it was the House Oversight Committee. We have House Speaker Mike Johnson in his initial response after Cheatle's resignation.
The task force that we'll be putting together is going to be very important. As I said, they have three responsibilities: to investigate what happened, the debacle that happened 2 Saturdays ago, to hold those accountable. It certainly was the director, Cheatle, but there may be others in the line of authority who are also culpable in what happened and the errors and mistakes there, and finally to ensure that those mistakes do not happen again.
So he said there, they want to make sure that they hold the people accountable. Every guest that we have had on since we've basically launched Blaze News Tonight is you can't look at the FBI, the Secret Service, any government agency as going to be holding their feet to the fire, making sure that you get the answers that you need. So do we have any faith in what Speaker Johnson is saying here?
Look, removing Cheatle does not change the culture at Secret Service. It doesn't change the culture at the Department of Homeland Security. It doesn't change the culture of the lead agency working the investigation right now, the FBI, who nobody trusts to get this right. Which is exactly why what we spoke about yesterday, why groups like Heritage Foundation's Oversight Project, Blaze Investigations, and so many others are doing the independent work because we don't trust FBI to answer, not even to answer our questions.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about this? What do you call it? Task force? Congress is going to try to get to the bottom of this. I mean, that's what Johnson is saying. So the speaker is signaling, and I want to give him a benefit of the doubt. I mean, I would just roll my eyes, which is my first reaction, and say, oh, you guys will write some strong letters at the end of this. But that is their job, right? I mean, do we have any hope that this will get somewhere?
We will definitely get more fiercely and strongly worded letters out of them, but that's all that they're going to get right now under this administration. Until the administration changes, the culture at that agency, at all of the agencies under DHS, are not going to change.
And Steve, you were saying before, when Kimberly Cheatle was asked direct questions yesterday about shell casings, she would not give an answer, yet we could still find that answer somewhere else.
Well, it's exactly what she was doing yesterday, was what they always do in these congressional hearings, is just avoid, obfuscate, and don't answer. And they're not answering questions that have to do with, as I said before, some top secret information or some classified investigative techniques. All she was asked over and over again is, do you know how many shots that the shooter fired? Mm-hmm. And she wouldn't answer a simple question like that. Well, today, the Pennsylvania State Police Chief told us it was 8 shell casings found on the roof. See how easy that was?
Right.
It's not hard.
Then why are we getting this kind of a pushback? And again, she's gone now. It's great, but the problem will still remain because the rot is still there.
I mean, they're like Steve said, they're not going to change the culture. The culture is, screw you, we're in charge. You're not really our bosses. And as I said yesterday, the reason that she would have to step down is not because of the power of Congress or its oversight capacity, according to the Constitution, but because of public pressure getting so great that they feel like she's a greater risk than not. And we need to mention what you said about DHS is true. First off, thank you, Bush, for that. Thanks for creating that department, Republican, right? And look at how it's turned out. Mayorkas has gotten away with everything. I mean, everything. And so if you trust him right now, he's still the one in charge of this. So what Steve is saying is correct. He's okay with getting rid of her, presumably, and thinks that makes political sense right now. But that has nothing to do with revealing the truth about the situation.
And we now know one of the major causes of this massive security failure, according to whistleblowers. Somebody approached Senator Josh Hawley, and at least one individual assigned to guard the rooftop abandoned his post due to hot weather that day. So is this typical for our security agencies to just go through and say, oh, you guys, it's a little hot out there. You know what? I'm not just going to stand my post here.
This is exactly the problem that we were talking about, is the culture has deteriorated. We are looking at a DEI culture, not a culture of excellence. We're talking about people that should be able to stand in any temperature at any time under any circumstances, any weather, and guard their post without being leaving. That person right there should be fired, should be dismissed, if maybe even charged with a crime.
And Matthew, we know that the FBI is just notorious for missing all of the red flags. If we just go back to any of the school shootings that we've had in this country. So is this going to be malice or simply incompetence when we get to the end?
I mean, of course, you can't say malice. I think that you have to say, though, that there's a malice underneath all the DEI policies. Mm-hmm. It's a hatred of excellence. It's a hatred of merit. And that ultimately leaves the country in a very vulnerable position. There's also the fact that they were not giving the Trump campaign and Trump's family what they wanted and what their security experts were telling them when they needed more people. So I don't think you need to, rush to the idea that there was some kind of hit job here or whatever. I've been able to falsify that just in terms of incompetence, severe incompetence of the worst possible kind that borders on malice, where it's not a hit, but it's a bad sort of incompetence. We still don't know a lot, though. By the way, I mean, we're still learning a lot of details. So there's a lot we need to know. What we do know is enough to say that people should be prosecuted because they didn't stand post because there was such a dereliction of duty.
Steve, thanks so much for joining us again today.
Thank you.
We appreciate you coming back in. Republicans could get a little too optimistic about facing Kamala Harris just ahead. As we discussed yesterday, President Joe Biden announced on Sunday that he will not seek re-election, and it's looking like Kamala Harris will be his replacement. Democrats will gather next month to their national convention, where Kamala will have to earn enough delegates to claim the nomination. And guys, it looks like she's going to have enough delegates. Chris Bedford is the senior politics editor for Blaze Media. And Chris, I know you said you thought it would be Kamala yesterday, but She has a 40% approval rating. So what do you think the odds are that the Democrats are going to look at somebody other than Kamala for their nominee?
I think that's what we kind of saw over the last couple of weeks after Biden's debate performance, was Democrats looking left and right for who could possibly be the right person to take over this job. And what they came down to was Kamala. The decision was made. Joe Biden wasn't eager to endorse her. The Obamas dislike her. That was just something that Congress slowly had to come around as the reason. You know, I was just talking to a friend who was an advisor to the Prime Minister of Australia a few administrations back, has worked in American politics, Australian politics, and he was saying, this is ridiculous. All other countries, I know that they're not the same size as the United States, but European countries, Canada, have proven that you can hold these mini primaries. You can hold these elections if you want to on very short notice. But I pointed out to him the difference in American politics is the machine apparatus. They want someone who has access to that machine. They've already built out this campaign. They don't want to start over from scratch. They want someone who's got that in place. Now, Democrats have a leg up on Republicans in that they've got their get out the vote effort built into nonprofits that are basically Acorn with a different name. They've got their get out the vote effort built into federal agencies that they've now basically put in charge of trying to sign people up to vote for them. They've got, although it's wavering, a get out the vote effort already built into a lot of the unions. You don't have to worry about that, but there's still a huge amount. And there's really no other country on the planet, no political party on the planet that can raise $350 million in hard and soft money over 48 hours. That's the kind of mechanisms that they want. They don't want to enter a primary. They just want that cash. They want to start spending it and beating up on Donald Trump now. And that's what they're going to get.
Chris, what do you make of the last 24 hours hitting the average Democratic voter? Do you think that people will be just as energized as their leaders are? Because I ask this because what happened just happened so fast. I mean, within the space of a day, they transferred power, or they transferred the nominee. And the elite excitement, of course, is off the charts. And it may be the case that maybe regular voters will feel the same way and say, yes, you know, Harris, let's go to war. But the difference is, it seems like there might be a difference between people who are spending that money and the people who are, you know, the rank and file in the party. Do you think they're going to take to this switch?
So I'm curious about that. Kamala Harris is someone who has failed nationally, failed completely. She literally came in last place in the 2020 Democratic primaries. Her staff don't like her. She has massive overturn in her own personal office. The rumors get out. And it's not just that people leave. It's that people come out afterwards and say she was awful to work for. She has so far been unable to graft onto the Democratic base nationally. Now, within the bubbles that I kind of grew up in and live, there is a lot of excitement for Kamala Harris. I'm from Massachusetts. Massachusetts Democrats are extremely excited. Facebook and Instagram and everything from even non-political Democrats are exploding. You see that down in Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia. You see it in these sort of coastal circles. You have to wonder how much that actually extends to the swing states where she needs to start winning. I think that would be a place where she would be certainly a lot weaker. But a lot of this, and I've been surprised by the explosion of enthusiasm for someone who Democrats really weren't enthusiastic for previously. I think it really comes down to just a release and pressure. For the last couple of weeks, they have been so depressed that it was really clear that their candidate, Joe Biden, was in massive mental decline. He wasn't able to compete with Donald Trump. He was sick. They were trying to compare COVID to assassination attempts just to get them out of their depression. Now this may be a fake glimmer of light, but at least there's a change. And they've got a candidate who's young, and she looks fine on paper. Hopefully the American people won't notice how annoying she is for the next few weeks as the Olympics go on, then the convention. So that glimmer of hope is something that they've seized to. But if it will last, I'm much more doubtful of that.
Chris, how dare you say that people don't like Kamala Harris? You must have missed Captain Kamala. You must have missed it, Chris.
I must have. I mean, it's kind of surprising how quickly they've turned on everything. For the last 3 or 4 years, we've been able to openly say that Kamala Harris, for example, was a diversity hire. We're not allowed to say that anymore. Now it's like the most awful thing you've ever said. Joe Biden said it. He said that's why he picked her. But then you see exactly what we're talking about here. You've got Michael Steele, the former chairman of the Republican National Committee out there. When he's not kissing butt and apologizing for who he is on MSNBC for a living, he's putting out these AI-generated comic book fan art of Kamala Harris as Captain America. I mean, what a pathetic place to be in life. But it is a really great window into how the Republican Party was for years, that people like Steele were in charge. And it's a great window into why people like Donald Trump, who promised to upend the GOP, are so popular with that base.
Matthew, who needs enemies when you have friends like that?
I have to say, I just want to emphasize what Chris just pointed out when you tweeted that earlier. It really is disgusting. The only thing worse than someone who, loves Kamala for good reason and is too dumb to see the flaws is someone like this who you have to say is disingenuous, has no loyalty, and led the RNC, is in charge of the Republican Party, and you're going for one of the least popular characters in recent Democratic history. It's disgusting, it's repulsive, and every time I see that I think, you know what, thank God for Trump. You all got exactly what you deserved. But that doesn't take away the fact from this problem now of, they think Harris is going to be much more popular than we think, right? So if you watch the cable channels on the other side last night, they were all saying, look, these people like us are living in a bubble and they make fun of her in the bubble. But actually, when she comes out onto the scene, she'll be much more popular than they think. What do we think about that? I'm curious.
I think they're going to try and spin that. You already have TikTok algorithms working overtime to try and make it so it seems like she's really cool, that she gets off with the kids, that I know we're talking about this later, that she is brat, which is a thing which I had to catch up on today, I admit. This is going to be a full-fledged. The same people who told you that Melania Trump didn't matter, literally a fashion runway model, and that Michelle Obama was an icon like Jackie O. These are the same folks who are going to come out and say Kamala Harris. Now, the internet, though, has been doing some good work on the other side. There's 4 years of hysterical clips of this person. Kamala Harris is someone who doesn't really think deeply about any of the issues facing the Democratic Party. In fact, she doesn't even do the homework enough to be able to simply repeat the party slogans in a way that a lot of other Democrats are capable of doing. They can't hide that. She looks cool in still pictures. She's certainly a lot younger than anyone else in Democratic leadership. That's a good thing. That's helpful with the Democratic base. But it's once she starts talking and you start to hear what she says and find out how deeply annoying she is, that you realize why she ended up dropping out of the DNC, out of the primaries, before she even got to Iowa.
Chris, Ukraine is a country next to Russia. The wheels on the school buses are yellow. We could go on and on. We could be unburdened by everything that has come before us here on Blaze News tonight.
2 letters.
But we will not go there. But what it all comes down to, you guys, is Kamala Harris popular enough to beat Donald Trump? That is the question on the table right now, Chris.
Well, I think the Republicans should take it very seriously. $350 million flowing to the party, to the candidate, and to the PACs. That money makes a big impact. A lot of that's going to, these people are pretty well defined. The Republicans are going to have to dump a lot of money into reminding the American people who Kamala Harris is, because the administration and the party that should be celebrating the first Jamaican vice president, the first possible president who's a child of 2 immigrants, in centuries. They should have been pushing her out there, but she's largely been hidden because she's not very good politically. Republicans have to step in here and start defining her. But this is certainly a real race. Any party that has overconfidence, we saw this with Democrats in 2016, ends up getting its butt kicked or getting surprised. So they should consider this a serious candidate, but they shouldn't fall. They certainly should not fall into despair. Democrats, I think, right now are so eager for any glimmer of hope that they're suddenly saying, this is great, they're on the path to victory. That's not true, but it is a real race again.
The good news is we will be getting to go through all of Kamala's quotes, at least for the next 3 weeks, until they decide who their nominee is actually going to be. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
I can't wait for it.
I can't either. Our next guest says that there's more to Biden's recent absence than he's letting on. Right after this.
She dropped out of the race, sir.
How are you feeling about Harris's campaign?
Can Harris beat Trump?
Joe Biden finally surfaces for the first time since he suspended his re-election bid. Despite his stepping down as a Democratic nominee, Biden recently reaffirmed his commitment to the 2024 campaign in a phone call to the Harris campaign. Take a listen.
Julie, if I didn't have COVID, I'd be sitting there with you, standing there with you. I'm so proud of what you've all done. And but this COVID keep me out of people's hair for the next 3 or 4 days. But I'm going to be on the road, and I'm not going anywhere.
He's not going anywhere, you guys. As Biden said in that phone call, he's currently out sick with COVID. Now, this is reportedly the reason that he had to cancel the keynote speech at a convention in Las Vegas just before he announced that he was no longer seeking the presidency. However, according to police sources and reported on by Jordan Schachtel, Biden actually suffered an undisclosed medical emergency during this time, and this was the reason for the canceled speech. Jordan joins us right now. So can you help shed some light on this? What's the background here? What really happened with this story?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So I was lucky enough to have an awesome team at Turning Point Action that helped me out with this story. But basically, a lot of people were sending emails over about his trip to Las Vegas and his abrupt departure. And basically what happened was something right before he was scheduled to speak at this conference last Wednesday, there was some kind of medical emergency that was dispatched over police radio, encrypted radio, so it's going to be tough to find a recording. But there were, my sources estimate that hundreds of people involved with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department heard this encrypted message that the president was having a health emergency. And the plan originally, according to several sources with the police department, was that they were going to take him to the Tier 1 hospital, so they have all the tools available. That was a couple miles off the road. And then a few minutes later, they pivoted to Harry Reid International Airport, where Air Force One took off and made it back to Dover, Delaware in record time, under 4 hours from Las Vegas. So there was some kind of emergency situation. And what's interesting is that, we talked to a lot of sources on this, and they all kind of had different perspectives. We had very high-ranking officers with the department, people that were directly on President Biden's detail, that were moving traffic around, and they all kind of came at it from a different perspective, but all told us very similar stories about what went down. So the corporate media can easily verify this with any sources that they have in the Las Vegas, law enforcement and emergency services divisions.
So why don't you think they said anything? And one of the interesting things about this story is what dogs aren't barking, right? And you've been on this. Why don't you think other people have picked it up on it?
I think it's just the same old story with the corporate media. They're in a box of acceptable commentary, and you have to remember that, they've been gaslighting us for almost 4 years now about the mental and physical health of President Biden. It wasn't until he got smoked by Donald Trump in the debate that suddenly, all the alarm bells were set off, and suddenly the president wasn't capable of being president. So they've been playing this game for a very long time. Eventually, they just decided, it seemed one day, a few days ago, that he was no longer going to be president anymore. And it's still, our command and control structure in the United States is a complete mystery. The Israeli prime minister showed up today, and apparently his team is trying to figure out who's in charge in Washington. So the media doesn't seem to want to answer those questions. You guys at the Blaze have been asking those questions for quite some time. So, it's up to a lot of citizen journalists and reporters with, citizen and law enforcement contacts to get to the bottom of this stuff.
So Matt asked you why these other outlets didn't report on this, but why did you and Turning Point pursue this the way that you did and decide that this was going to be important to bring to the American people?
Yeah, I think we just thought it was really strange what happened last week. The president having COVID is nothing particularly abnormal that would make him the man's been sick and coughing up all kinds of things for years now. He's constantly in a state of sickness. The clip you played, he sounded horrible. So this is like the norm for Biden. So the idea that, suddenly he would test positive for COVID after this, pandemic era is over, and then they need to rush him out of Las Vegas just didn't really pass the smell test. So we looked into it, and these police resources were very quick to respond because some of the people that I talked to were upset that that they're advancing this narrative through the president's communications team, which didn't make any sense to them at all because they noticed the sense of urgency on the ground. If the president had the sniffles, they wouldn't have sent in like all this backup support. Like this was like the equivalent of a 5-alarm fire. It was a serious emergency situation. And now we're just left trying to figure out what exactly happened. And luckily, people stepped up to say, like, no, the situation was actually, much more severe than just, the president has a runny nose. Like his doctor, who's also in the family business, seemed to assure us with that information.
Yeah, Jordan, it was astonishing to me because I had someone immediately on our team check this out, and it checked out exactly what you're saying. This is wide open to mainstream sources to talk about this. And so that therefore makes it realistic to speculate on what exactly is wrong with Joe. But I mean, I think you did some great work here, and people should realize that we're in an era where people are out there doing work like this all the time, every day, and actually breaking things that mainstream sources won't.
Yeah, I love that it's going to be everybody kind of pulling together, Jordan coming through, the Blaze Media coming through, Turning Point, everybody coming through, because we need this. I have every single day printed out Joe Biden's latest doctor report because I feel like it's something that they try and throw in our face. And by the way, you guys, his symptoms have resolved, according to his doctor. He's over all of the infections now. But it's so funny to me to actually have to like live in this world where he's the president of the United States, and we still don't know that we have the most accurate information every day, Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, they hold him up for 6 days, as we all witnessed, and no one in the media seemed to really have any questions. They released a statement on X.com, a post from one of his staffers saying that he was handing over power to Kamala Harris, and no one in the media was even curious enough to show up at his house and see what the heck is going on there. So that's the level of inquiry that they're allowed to pursue. And I have contacts in the corporate media too, and I'm friendly with a lot of those people, and they'll tell you like they can't cross the line because they will never be allowed to work in that industry again. It's very tightly controlled with the narratives, and it's by design. It seems that there's just this complete fusion between the media and the so-called uniparty in Washington, D.C. So it leaves it up to us to get answers. And we live in this media environment now, luckily, where you can put out something on Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, and you'll get a lot of responses from concerned citizens, and you can kind of just go right around the traditional media gatekeepers to get answers.
Well, we will always be here and be giving credit to people like you and the work you do. I am very curious. I think we're running out of time here, but real quick, do you want to speculate with us on what exactly you think the problem is, or do you know enough to say?
I've heard all kinds of things, and that's why I don't want to speculate about exactly what's the deal with him. But I don't think I think that we can kind of believe our vision, our so-called lying eyes about something is clearly wrong with the guy. He's not fit to be president. He hasn't been fit to be president for years, since he really started this whole thing. And the people who noticed were deemed crazy conspiracy theorists, but we keep getting proven right. But I'll leave that up to, I guess, the physicians to make the official diagnosis.
And from here, Jordan, we'll look at the peaceful, it's not transfer of power, but transfer of campaigns over to Kamala Harris. So thanks so much for joining us.
Appreciate it.
Democrats might still have some electoral tricks up their sleeves this November. Stay tuned. We all remember the drama of the 2020 election. Stalled vote counts, mysterious white vans, and burst pipes in the middle of the night. And we also know that it, of course, was the freest and fairest election in the history of elections. However, dramatic Banana Republic-style election antics might not be necessary to flip red states blue. Daniel Horowitz, Blaze podcast host of Conservative Review and senior editor for Blaze News, recently wrote a piece uncovering how Democrats have some ballot tricks up their sleeve this November, and he joins us right now. So, Daniel, can you explain some of the ballot reform and initiatives that Democrats are employing?
Great to be with you, Jill. And yeah, our founders understood the dangers of direct democracy. When you put things directly on the ballot, hey, do you want candy and lollipops? Do you want unicorns flying? Yes or no? And the ability of the elites and the oligarchs to fund those campaigns and manipulate the people would be very potent. And this is what we're seeing throughout the country. If you notice, even in red states, you have these abortion initiatives that are getting on the ballot, and they're passing in ways that would never pass through a legislature. But again, these moneyed interests are succeeding there. So now they're trying to go for a force multiplier. Well, not only will we put individual liberal issues, but disguised in clever language, often double negative language on a ballot that confuses people. What's a yes vote? What's a no vote? But to change elections itself. And just as a background, Jill, what's happening now in red states is with the advent of these state freedom caucuses, they're creating a bold contrast between the values of the voters embodied through that jersey of Freedom Caucus versus the standard jersey of Uniparty. So the best way to continue to get liberals in is to muddle that distinction. And that's what they're doing with ranked choice voting. And we're seeing this in Idaho. It looks like they just succeeded in getting this on the ballot. And if the change goes through, it would essentially abolish partisan primaries. So you'd have a bunch of people with no labels. That's what they want. No labels in a jungle election. Take the top four and go to the general election, and then have ranked choice voting where there's this convoluted scheme of your first and second and third choice that's strategically organized in a way that will allow these stealth Democrats to win elections by virtue of having the most money and name ID, but they won't be tagged with that Democrat jersey that only 20-25% of people want in these states. This is how they turned Alaska blue. If you remember, in Alaska, they elected a Democrat congressman last election. That's how they got Lisa Murkowski to win re-election. So they already have proof of concept. Jill, if they do this in every red state, they got 50 blue states right there.
You mentioned Alaska right here. So are there any other states that are employing these initiatives?
Sure. I mean, you do have on a small scale for certain elections in Utah, they're doing that, which is very concerning. They obviously have this in Maine, which has not really been such a favorable state to the right. So I don't consider that a loss, even though I don't believe in it. But it's something that the public cannot articulate. But what they put on the ballot is language in Idaho, for example, that we're going to open up the primaries. But in fact, they're not opening up a traditional primary. They're abolishing the entire concept of a primary. So you would have a bunch of people with no labels running on the same ballot. Now, obviously, they're not going to run people like Kamala Harris out in the open in a state like Idaho. They might all say, hey, you know, I'm for gun rights, I'm for lower taxes. But in fact, they're these Mike DeWine sort of Republicans, these liberal Republicans that artfully, glide their way in there, that they can't win closed partisan primaries. But now with a no labels, androgynous sort of transgender partisan primary or nonpartisan primary, they could easily get in by virtue of their money and superior organization.
Hey, I'm so glad that you're talking about this issue. It's so important for people to realize, as someone who spent too much time in California, very keenly aware. But for people who aren't political science, experts, it's important they realize everything about the details and the structure matters. And you can change the structure, you change the rules, and you will indeed change the results. But their leaders in these states, right, should know better. And in many times, in many places, they've gone along with this and in a sense destroyed, their own party and their own high ground. They've ceded it. What do you have to say about that? And how do you think the map looks now? Do you think there's more people on the right in these states who are in leadership positions who are fighting back or understand the problem or not?
No, absolutely. And that's why they're coming up with this plan B. For years, we've left so much political capital on the table. You look at those maps in Europe, the elections in Great Britain, elections in France, where, especially in France, where Marine Le Pen came so close, but she came up with nothing. You saw those large swaths of land that voted supermajority for her party against Macron's party or the far left. But it's winner take all. There's no system of federalism. Whereas in America, you have sovereign states. So even if Democrats were able to create a permanent majority that they're gunning for at a national level, you would have half the states where they're essentially a non-entity. You go to a place like Idaho, you go and call the cops if you see a Democrat. Democrats can't get anywhere. So that's why what they're doing, Matt, is they're artfully working with establishment Republicans who don't want the grassroots candidates, who have recently, especially in Idaho, they've taken over the party. They've taken over the party leadership structure, including the chairmanship. Dorothy Moon, the chairwoman, she's a terrific leader. So what they're doing is saying, hey, what if we bypass the Republican primary altogether? Democrats alone, this is important, Democrats alone could not accomplish this. But when you have the establishment Republicans utilizing them to box out and marginalize the right through this process, sort of what Macron did working with the communists to box out Le Pen, then there is a concern that they might be able to succeed in some of these states. Remember, the guy leading this effort in Idaho that got it at least on the ballot for a vote is former Republican Governor Butch Otter. So it just goes to show the rot that we've had in these deep red states for so long, and we've done nothing about it. Now that we are, iron is meeting iron, and they're starting to fight our guys. But hopefully we have enough grassroots to defeat these ballot measures.
Daniel, our mutual friend Steve Dace calls you the prophet of woe and lamentation, and I want that energy when you tell me your opinion on mail-in voting.
Oh my gosh. I mean, again, there is a reason these guys think of everything. Early voting, ballot harvesting, mail-in voting, drop boxes, 50 days of voting, ranked choice voting. You can't just have a normal election where you go into, like a kid, I went in with my parents on election day. You have a normal ballot box. There's a reason for it. Process determines outcomes, and they understand that. They understand that the voters that are not engaged need a litany of days and processes to get them out. And if you're bombing them with mailers where you literally give it to them on a silver platter and say, hey, here it is, go vote, and you do it enough, you're going to get those low propensity, low information voters to turn out. And again, that's true in a general election in a competitive state, but it's also true of primaries in a red state. That's how they get their Democrats out who register as Republicans. We've seen this. It's funny. The same proportion of Democrats who vote in early voting, 30 days early voting against Republicans, we're finding it in primaries as well, that the early vote overwhelmingly goes towards the liberal Republican in the primary. So it's kind of a parallel process. And honestly, Jill, I think this is why Republicans did not fight these anomalies in red states for so many years, because they wanted to use them for primaries.
Daniel, that is a great way of looking at it. Thank you so much for your first appearance on Blaze News tonight. It will definitely not be your last one.
Looking forward to coming back. Take care.
The Kamala Harris campaign tries to appeal to the kids by being a brat. We'll explain next. There's a new meme circulating online, and it's called Kamala is a brat. What does that mean? I don't know. We had to look it up. In Gen Z slang, a brat is defined as an icon, an embrace of authenticity and confidence in oneself. The term was inspired by Charli XCX's album Brat, and it led to a TikTok trend of having a brat summer. CNN took time out of the news cycle to cover Kamala's newfound brattiness. Take a look.
Charli XCX, who I do know, quote, brat, you're just that girl who is a little messy and likes to party and maybe says some dumb things sometimes, end quote.
So it's the idea that we're all kind of brat and Vice President Harris is brat? I don't know if you're brat. I think you aspire to be brat.
The Harris campaign liked it so much that they copied Charli XCX's Brat album cover there on X. I mean, look at the similarities there. So we knew we had to bring in somebody cooler than Kamala and honestly cooler than ourselves to come in and talk about this. So we are joined now by documentarian and star of the 2020 film Uncle Tom, Chad Jackson. So Chad, this is apparently an attempt by Kamala's campaign to appeal to the Gen Z voters. So is this going to work?
Strangely enough, it might actually, which it kind of feels icky hearing myself say this. But
well, Chad, it's been fun. No, just kidding. Keep going. I don't want to hear that answer, Chad.
Unfortunately, this is where we are in American politics, and this kind of push to enfranchise just everybody. And I'm not pleased with it. But we've seen this kind of thing happen before, time and again, especially as it relates to Democrats and the left. What they do is they try to appeal and emotionalize two groups in particular, young folks and black folks. To the extent that you can emotionalize those two subsects, you will then have those who feel very passionate about this candidate, about this policy, whatever the case may be, and then the rest will take care of itself. And so, historically, young folks don't vote in high numbers like folks over the age of 30. But I don't think the Democrats care as much about that as much as they care about the kind of influence that youngsters have in American politics.
Matt, please help me here. Please.
I don't even know where to start with this. First off, I do want to say for the record, as I said on Twitter, yeah, she's imitating the album, but you just look at her social media accounts with this, dressing on it. And I'll tell you exactly what it looks like. I mean, you recognize it right away. It looks like the account of a weeds shop in a strip mall in LA or wherever else. I mean, that's the aesthetic. And then the fact that the music is for, very young people who are maybe even too young to vote. And then also apparently it's a gay thing as well. It seems absolutely, over the top ridiculous. But I think what Chad said is right. I mean, conservatives like to complain about this sort of thing and then lose, right? And say, oh, they picked up AOC in a line and she did auditions. And I looked at that and immediately thought, well, yeah, maybe we should do auditions too for people who are attractive stars, who are likable and draw other people to themselves. On the other hand, there's something about this, and this is what I'm curious about, something about this that just feels like we're reaching a saturation point, or there's something here that's such a stretch. It seems a little ridiculous. There's something in the Harris campaign where I don't think it's hope on my part. It really does feel like we've pushed this a little too far. Does anyone else feel that? Do you feel that?
I certainly feel that. What they're trying to do is they're trying to revive her. I mean, we're talking about a woman who polled pitifully during the 2020 primaries. I think Pete Buttigieg polled higher than her during the 2020 Democrat primaries, a guy whose name people can barely pronounce, who comes from a state, who was the mayor of a town that most people don't even know about. And yet he was able to poll higher than Kamala Harris during the 2020 Democrat primaries. She was picked by Joe Biden because she's a black woman, and they believed that she would secure black votes for Joe Biden during the 2020 election. And she was able to, in a sense, finesse her way to where she now is positioned, where she is receiving endorsements from such folks as Joe Biden and the Clintons and others going into this open DNC convention. And so, look, I mean, she's wildly unpopular. And again, the Democrats, the leftists, they understand that in order for her to be looked at as a viable candidate, they have to emotionalize blacks. They have to emotionalize the youth in particular, because these are the individuals, unfortunately, I mean, these two subsects, these two groups, unfortunately, are the ones who are the leaders of culture, as it were. And so if you can emotionalize those two groups in particular, they cause a kind of reverberation in the country, and that's what they're hoping for. They don't so much care about the votes that they will get from blacks and from young people, but they do care about the kind of influence that appealing to these groups would mean for them, in my opinion.
Chad, we know that they can't wrap Kamala Harris in the American flag. It's not going to be received well by their voting base. So I guess they did have to do something a little different, a little bit more creative. And it's not like they're going to have to stick with this marketing for the next few months, but just for her initial push out of the gate. So I don't know. Am I turning over to your side already, Chad? Is this how persuasive you've been already?
I mean, again, I just keep going back to the fact that the Democrats are strategists. They don't put so much time and effort in the political sciences and the cognitive sciences and the social sciences for no reason. They are very strategic. They are very manipulative. They know how to propagandize. They know how to emotionalize people into going to their side. They understand that in order for Kamala Harris to be taken seriously going into the DNC convention, they have to make her look as popular as possible, and they're really reaching for whatever they can, and appealing to the youth is a huge part of their strategy.
Okay, let's go even further. Let me push the point, right? I mean, they are absolutely going to do that. That is their task. How do you make Kamala Harris cool? How do you make her likable when she's not either of those things whatsoever? And when you look at this, I just get the sense they almost picked the wrong band, the wrong aesthetic, even to do that. And it's almost as if every part of her, when you look at it closely, it's out of focus. And so this entire, theme of, oh, well, she is the person of color. She is a Black American. I mean, Don Lemon is on record saying, okay, well, technically she's not really African American, right? I mean, she's Jamaican American and Indian American. And then, she probably is one of the only people in living memory who has slaveholders on both sides of her family. Very interesting. So once you start looking closely, it always seems like something's a little off.
About 20 seconds, Chad.
Yeah, I mean, everything about her is off. Again, very unlikable. She's not even really a Black person, but yet, because she went to a HBCU, she joined a Black fraternity or a sorority, she's supposed to check all the boxes. Really, they are making a character, if you will. The question is, will people fall for it or not? I don't think they will.
We'll be following along. Thanks so much, Chad, for your time. Make sure to subscribe to Blaze News Tonight on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to rate and review the show. That helps others to discover it as well. And we'll break it down all for you right back here tomorrow night.